Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. Today we are so excited to welcome to the pod the author of It Came from the Trees and the upcoming mystery James Digs Her Own Grave, Allie Russell. Okay, so welcome Allie Russell to the podcast. We are so excited to be talking to you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And congrats on launching your podcast.
Thank you. Well, it wouldn't happen without guests like you and such good content, really. That's the big deal here.
Content as
Yeah.
in what we're doing or what
No,
what
what she's
Oh
written.
man. So yeah, let's get this out of the way first because as you well know, I am a huge fan of your upcoming book, Mystery James Digs Her Own Grave. So you were definitely one of the first people that was like, please, I hope she says yes that she wants to come on. So thank you again.
No, I'm excited to be here. I'm just grateful that you guys asked.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of talk about a few different things. You are our first middle grade author, so there's some, specific topics when it comes to that I'm really interested to discuss. But then also seeing we've talked to like three or four people and you're probably the first one that's kind of in the same boat that I am, which is I've just always loved horror and scary stories and movies and all of those kinds of things. So we're kind of in the same boat for that, which is very exciting for me. But yeah, just what is your history with all things spooky to start?
Well, I mean, it's been my whole life. I probably watched my first horror movie when I was like 4 or 5. Halloween was always the biggest holiday in my house growing up. I have 3 sisters plus my parents, and so, like, Halloween parties, Halloween costumes, my mom always went all out for decorations. As far as, like, the movies, like, I Silver Bullet was one of my very, very first horror movies that I watched
Yeah,
when I was a kid, and it used to scare the crap out of me. It probably is why I have such a deep, like, fascination with werewolves today. I'm sure that that's it. And then, the other part is my family just really, like, thrived on horror and scaring each other. And goes for, like, my whole extended family. My dad had, like, 10 siblings and when he was growing up, and that was how, like, they bonded, like, scaring each other, like, even into adulthood. And, when we would gather for, like, family cookouts or anything like that, ghost stories, that's how the night always ended, like, them
Sounds
telling
like
ghost
a
stories
really
from
cool
when they were
family.
kids. I'm sorry, what's that?
I said, I'm sorry. That sounds like a really cool family. I think we just talked about heavy things and hard things and trauma.
Well, I mean, I think that there's some of that in every family, but, I for me, like, this I don't know, this was how, like, my family bonded, like, Friday, Saturday nights after you came in the house from playing outside, like, we did horror movie nights. And, like, even as a little kid, like, we would be in the bedroom about to go to sleep, and my dad would turn out the lights, and he would say goodnight, but he would stand in the doorway, and he would growl. And, like, even though we knew that it was just him and he
That
was, like, sitting around, it was still scary, but it was also fun.
this really like explains some things for your books. Like I'm getting a little some insight here. No, that's so fascinating. And do obviously, you can expand on this, but I would assume like your love of story in general kind of comes from those formative experiences too.
Absolutely. One of my, like, fondest childhood memories is, one of our first houses. Whenever it would thunderstorm, like, my dad always really liked to go sit on the porch and, like, kinda watch the thunderstorm, and that's one of the first times I remember him telling me a scary story, and from there, it was just like, ugh, I was in love with scary stories. So
That's so cool. How much do you think, and you grew up in Pittsburgh, right?
yes.
How much do you think, like, sort of that area, we're in South Central Pennsylvania, and whenever we go to Pittsburgh, there's just it's like a mixture between feeling sort of like old world, almost European, but like the hills and the way that city and everything is built sort of almost into the mountains seems to lend itself to the genre too.
I think so too, and it's got a long horror history, with George Romero and zombies and all that good stuff. I Pittsburgh is so old that I feel like everything there is haunted. There are so many trees, like, there's so many trees between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, not that those are the only 2 cities in the state of Pennsylvania, but, they're 2 of the biggest, and there's
Yeah.
so many trees between them. Like, you think about cryptids and UFO sightings, and, like, there's just a lot of inspiration and fuel for spooky subjects.
Well, yeah, and obviously we'll be getting into cryptids here in a second with you.
And you're close to Appalachia.
Yeah,
For
that's true,
sure.
yeah, like the Appalachian Trail, going and all the stories that
Yeah.
you hear from things that go there.
I love that you guys did the sitting out and watching the thunderstorms. That was definitely something fun that my family would do. There's just something very relaxing about it as like the torment is going around you and you're having this bonding time. And then to add the spooky story onto it, like, wow, I bet that was like so fun.
Yeah, and then but you're safe, right? Like, you're on the
Yes.
porch with your parents and your family, but like you said, like, the chaos is happening around you, so, yeah, it's great.
It is very similar to sort of like the way we interact with horror in general of like this, that's scary off there that we're looking at, but where we're at, we're safe and be able to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So when you say that they scared each other, aside from ghost stories, are we talking about like hiding behind things, dressing up in masks?
Yeah.
Like what kind of scares are we talking
Yeah, I
here?
need to know a little more detail.
Yeah, no, absolutely hiding back. Um, I I don't I won't I don't wanna paint, like, a picture of my dad where it's like, "Oh my goodness, he was terrorizing those children," because he certainly wasn't. He's the best dad. When I was a kid, one time he put, like, a burglar mask on, and he, like, snuck up on, like, me and my sisters and, one of our cousins, and it was one of our boy cousins, and he was supposed to be, like, protecting us. I'm putting that in quotes, but he was the first one to, like, jump behind the couch when my dad came in with, like, the burglar mask on his face. One of their favorite stories that they love to tell, my dad was the youngest, and so he had a lot of older brothers, and I can't remember whose apartment it was, but he had gone to, like, one of his older siblings' apartments, and they were, like, going down to the basement to, like, check out, like, the space, and one of the brothers was hiding down there with, like, some sort of, like, creepy mask on, so they scared the other brother, so, like, yeah, it's just you had to be, like, prepared to be around my family for the scares, so, yeah, it was more than just ghost stories.
No, I love that, and actually there's another author, Haley Newland, that was talking about.
Oh, Haley.
Yeah, she was talking about somewhere that horror, and these kinds of scares, they're really fun, but it's almost like with anything else that it has to be almost like a consensual act, that you have to
Uh-huh.
be in on it, and when you are, it can be really fun and exciting, but, like, it's funny because Rebecca had very similar experiences where it was not.
I was just sitting here going like, yeah, I started really young with the horror movies, but it wasn't fun. My brother would put on the masks and terrorize us, but it also wasn't fun.
But it
Uh,
was one of those things where it was like you didn't want it to happen, and then you know how
mm,
you
mm,
you know,
mm.
you jump out and you scare someone, then it's like everyone laughs and moves on. He was
Yeah.
very much like, "I'm gonna keep doing it
Well, it
over
was
and
very
over."
much like the joke was always like to like never let you in on the fact that it was a joke.
Yes.
It was like,
Right.
let's see how scared we can get her. Cause even like I remember being at Universal Studios and we're on one of those rides as like, and I'm like 7 or something. And it's like one of those where they're showing like the stunt show where everything's
Mm.
going like crazy. And he tells me, he's like, oh my God, get off the train. Like, we got to get out of here. And I'm crawling off the back, trusting him. And finally my parents like, what the hell are you doing? Like, get back in the car. It just I think there was a mixture of his age and my gullibility and just I think I was always, like, just in terror of bad things. I
Oh,
was conditioned
I'm
for it.
so sorry. Yeah, I completely agree with you guys, it does have to be consensual, and I will say, like, for my family in particular, like, it was always a quick jump scare, like, it was never
Yeah.
anything that went, for
No, it
hours or
sounds
days
like
or months, and so you get, like, the thrill of the jump scare, and then it's like, "Oh, that
yes.
was fun," like a roller coaster, and then it's over.
That sounds like a ton of fun. The only thing that I can remember from childhood that I really did enjoy was my mom would always say, like, I went to a horse farm and I was, petting a horse and it bit me. And I was like, oh, it's like, yeah. It's like, do you want to feel I still have a lump for where it hit me? And then like she would show a place on like her arm or whatever. And she's like, yeah, feel right here. And I touch it. She go, ah! And it was like, she would do that many, many times. And I always knew the jump was going to come, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
fun.
there's like a love to it, it sounds like with your family, Allie, where it was very much
Yes.
like this was our thing, like this is how we show, affection almost and that kind of thing, and it really
You didn't actually think you were gonna die.
No, not at all.
but it's kinda interesting because it shows, like, how that path can split in 2 ways depending on how you sort of interact with it, but so I wanna talk a little bit about how I think that the fact that you guys told ghost stories and that kind of thing when you were at a young age, did you always when you decided you were going to write, was middle grade always your audience that you were interested in, and sort of, like, how did that come about?
No, middle grade probably wasn't always what I was interested in. I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. Used to the way my parents tell it, they would try to read me picture books, but I would read them the pictures instead, because I
That's
couldn't read at that
cool.
time. So, like, I've always wanted to tell stories. It was to a point, like, I would read a Goosebumps book, and I once wrote, like, a sequel to a Goosebumps book, and my dad read it and was like, "Oh, this is excellent, you could be a writer like Stephen King or something like that," and I didn't know who Stephen King was at the time because I was, like, so young.
Yeah.
So when I was writing as, like, a child, I was just writing stories with, like, no concept of, like, age or anything like that. I think I mostly wrote about adults because you watch so many horror movies and most of them center on adults. So I had no real thoughts about, "Oh, I wanna cater specifically to middle grade." That didn't come until much later in my life, when I started working in children's publishing, and then I got my MFA and I knew I wanted to, like, write for that specific audience because those are some of, like, my coziest childhood memories is, like, reading horror books when I was, like, between the ages of, like, 10 and 13, and so I just really want to, like, give some young reader those same cozy horror feeling of, like, how Rebecca was talking about, like, you're on the porch, thunderstorm happening around you, but you're safe. Same thing with the horror that I write, like, I want people to, like, read it, get chills, but then also, have a blanket wrapped around them and know that they're still safe because
Mhm.
it's just in the pages of a book and you can close it if it's too
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, it's funny because I think it was my 10th birthday, my aunt sent me Monster Blood right when it
But
was coming out, and, like, it was all over from there, so I would say that you definitely capture that same feeling in your books of that feeling when I first read Monster Blood, or even I think One Day at Horrorland is really the one that when I read your books that I think of because I think the best horror for middle grades or, for younger readers has that aspect that, like, I don't know if they're going to be okay. I'm pretty sure they're going to be okay because this book is for middle grade readers. But there's more than one point where I'm
Yes.
like, how far are they going to go with
Yes.
this?
And, I when I was reading her books, I felt like I didn't have a word for how I wanted to explain, but that's exactly true. Like, it feels very adjacent to when I was a kid reading R.L. Stine and loving it. And at the same time, I was surprised how much I enjoyed it as an adult. And so I remember being on a long trip and reading Night of the Living Dummy to
Mm.
my mom, and she was like, aloud, and she was like, "Keep going. I want to know." And it's like, it crosses over into there are some points, like how you said, like, I think they're gonna be okay, but it 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 definitely brought back that feeling of nostalgia for me.
yeah, I appreciate you both saying that, and since we're talking about Goosebumps, Rebecca, you mentioning Night of the Living Dead, like, that was, I think, how I got my start with Goosebumps because I remember my older sister reading that one to me, and, like, she was reading it aloud, and it just got creepier and creepier.
Yeah.
I think that's scarier of the Goosebumps and the Goosebumps books, I think that they're viewed today as, like, camp, right? Like, they're kinda campy, they're kinda, like, silly, goofy because the covers are very cartoony and fun, but in a lot of those books, the kids are not okay at the end, actually.
No.
Like, the big bad comes back or it's still there, like, lurking in the corner, ready to haunt them again. So I appreciate you guys saying that it gives you, books give you those feelings because that was the goal.
Well, that's one of the things, the question that I had was it's sort of like, do you approach like when you get to those scary moments in your books, do you think of it like, because I think of it almost as like this Goldilocks where you don't want it to be too scary, you don't want it to not be scary at all. How do you find when you're at that sort of sweet spot where you're at something that is going to creep out? Not just a 10 to 13-year-old, but 40-year-olds here that are getting creeped out
Mhm.
and say, like, okay, I sort of trust, respect, not only that the kids are going to be able to handle it, but that parents are going to be okay with their kids reading it too.
Honestly, I wish I could say, like I wish I could give you a definitive answer, but the answer is really I have no clue, and that's honestly just because, like, everyone's fear range is different. I'm scared of heights. There are a lot of kids who are not scared of heights.
I
A
same here.
story a
Adam
story about heights.
terrified.
Yeah, well, like, and a story about if you're not afraid of heights, that's not gonna do it for you. I'm afraid of the dark. There are a lot of kids who are not afraid of the dark, and I always think, that I'm sorry to bring it up, but that very controversial film, Skinamarink, where some
Yeah,
people were, "This is boring," and I was like, "This is horrifying," because the whole thing took place in the dark, and I'm, again, terrified of the dark. So, like, it worked for me as a whole. So I guess for me, like, it's hard for me to say, like, what is too much, what's not enough, what's just right. I really look to my beta readers to help me with that. I look to my editor, my agent. For example, in the new Mystery James 2, which I'm revising right now, there's a scene that I wrote it and, after I thought about it, I was like, this might be too much. But my editor read it and she's like, "No, I don't think it's too much at all. I think it looks fine. And I think you could punch up the scares in some places." So I just never really know. But for me, my goal is to try to push those boundaries of horror for young readers. And specifically because of the kind of horror reader that I was as a kid, my horror, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word that I want.
tolerance threshold.
Tolerance, exactly. Thank you. My horror tolerance is probably higher than most people's because, again, I watched my first horror movie when I was 4. But, I'm thinking about all the librarians and teachers right now who the number one thing that I'm hearing from them, especially, when I go to conference and stuff, is, "Oh, the kids love horror. We need scarier horror for kids at the tail end of that middle grade spectrum," because it's a big spectrum, right? Like 8 to 12. There's a
Mhm.
lot that can happen in the middle, and the kids at the tail end of the spectrum are not getting necessarily the scares that they need. So I guess my goal as, when I'm thinking about horror, I don't wanna go light. I wanna push the boundaries a little bit. I want, like, those kids to be scared if they want it. If they don't, they can close the book, and that's what I'm aiming for.
I think that's really interesting. I teach fifth grade, so I'm right in that sort of like
Yeah.
range of kids, and I can see them. They go to Goosebumps, and they go to a lot of, obviously. Sorry,
I
I'm
That's
gonna
okay.
start
apologize.
over here. I teach fifth grade, and so I'm right in that sort of group. They usually turn 11 when they're with me, and I definitely see that where Goosebumps to them is like a third or fourth grade book.
Mhm.
Uh, Fear Street is a little too, like, set in its time that it
Uh-huh.
doesn't really connect to them as much. That's very, like, late '80s, early
Mhm.
'90s, and it just doesn't do it for them. So finding books like yours and, I think of a few others that they really connect with, and I've been reading them out loud, and I think that a lot of these kids are like, "Whoa, these things exist?" Like, these are not being pushed to me in the same ways
Right.
that other books are, but it sort of is more likely to keep them being a reader.
Well,
Mhm.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about how we, have this generation that is, we get phones really, really early, right? You're
Yep.
exposed to all kinds of content. So I think when I think back to what third and fourth grade is very different what third and fourth grade is now. And, probably they're ready for a little bit more of desensitization of things than I would have imagined. So I feel like to push the envelope a bit more in the books. And then I'm thinking about like the Fear Street, how thick it is. That's just, it's a lot unless you're like a committed reader all the time. So to have something like Mystery James or It
Mhm.
Came from the Woods, it's just the trees. I'm sorry, which I loved. Let me say again. To have a book like Mystery James or It Came from the Trees is so like important because it's approachable.
Yeah.
And I was saying to Adam, like, I loved throughout the Mr. James book how you would have the definitions. You'd take like that left side of the page to just really like, it was fun. Like you would describe like, okay, well, here's what an epitaph is and go into some of the details of it. And it never felt, it almost felt like you broke like the fourth wall, but like not really. But then it did not disrupt the flow. It just made me even more engaged. And even though like I knew what those things were, I just still wanted to read them. And, so yeah, and sorry, I got confused because she said she was afraid of the woods.
No.
That's why that happened. But No, I mean, the both of them, I was just speeding through because and I was, having read a lot of horror books now and a lot of thriller books, you really give such an atmospheric feel to all of them. And especially like they strike different notes for me, which is shows I think your dynamism as a writer that you can do both. But I just wanted to keep going. Like I was, and again, I'm right saying this as 41, almost 42, and I was really engaged. Like I feel like Mystery James just has it all, and I feel like from it came from the trees. Like that would be like a nightmare. Like I would never want to be involved in that. And it's like a perfect setting for just that would be horrible if that happened. And what would you do? And it just so good. And I wasn't a Girl Scout or someone that went to summer camp, but it sure as shit made me want to have been, honestly,
It made
because
you want to?
the way that they bonded together and
Yes,
the
the
way that they
second group, yeah.
yes, it made me feel like they could do anything. And when they're in a situation where they have to like see what all they can combine and come together to like come against this. And I love how they all just like contribute certain things to this pile and you're
Yeah.
like, how's this all going to work together?
It's like
But
a cryptid Home Alone.
it is really, that's a perfect way to say it. It was awesome.
Oh, compliment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I felt like as soon as I was done reading Mystery James, I go, "Oh my god, I need a series." And then you were like, "Oh, good news." I was like, "Really?" Because she just
I know, I'm a
touches
little like, 2 is good, 3, 4, 5 would be better, but I'll take what I can get
yeah,
at this point.
but she
Well,
really does have the most. She has everything you could want in this book. And Allie, please go into that.
yeah, no, I really appreciate you both saying that. I am the kind of reader, when I'm reading, I don't mind like the interstitials or the asides. Like I like blog posts and newspaper articles, as evidenced by like
Yeah.
and you were talking about how like kids get phones a lot earlier these days than we didn't have phones when we were that age, but the internet was new. And I remember how easy it was to like fall down a rabbit hole. Like, oh, you learn about something on like Unsolved Mysteries, or you hear about something in like one of those like tabloid news, like That Boy or something like, and
Yes.
you could easily fall down like an internet wormhole just like researching things. So I think it's like kind of similar, like it wasn't obviously like right at our disposal. You're on the bus or in the car, so you can't just whip out your desktop computer from 1990 something, so it wasn't the same. But one of the goals with Mystery James was thinking about like that age range, and we know what an epitaph is, but you don't necessarily know that if you've only been on this planet for 10, 11 years.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to like try to introduce kids to things that I thought were like spooky and interesting when I was a kid, without them having to like go pick up their phone to learn what it was. Because for me in particular, every time I pick up my phone, I get distracted. I do
Yep.
not get on
That's
my
such a good
phone
point.
yeah, and do the thing that, like, I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I get very this happens with audiobooks. I really wish that, like, I miss the days of, like, audiobooks being on CDs, because every time I pick up my phone, sure, I'll go over to the Libby app, but then I'm also on Instagram, or I'm also, on Blue
Mm.
Sky, or, checking email. And so I just really miss, like, being disconnected from the internet in that way. And so, like, that was the goal with Mystery James, was to try to, like, educate kids, get without them feeling like I'm educating them, give them the information where if you want to later, you can go look up more about like cemeteries, or, the human body, and mortuary science and all these things if you want to, but like the base facts are there.
That's really interesting. So you said I wanted to ask, when you had mentioned it before, your beta readers and obviously editors. Do you have middle grade beta readers, or do you just like? Because I was just
Um,
thinking, like, for a book like this, like, how does that work?
I don't have middle grade. I don't have any children. My nephew, my sweet baby nephew, is 22 years old at this point. So I don't have like younger beta readers. I have my editor. I have, other people who work in publishing. I have friends who are also middle grade authors, so they're writing for the same audience. We have a group, it's called Spooky Middle Grade. So sometimes, if I'm unsure about something, I will run to and everyone in the group does this. I'll run to Spooky. Hey, do kids know about, X, Y, and whatever the question is? And people who do have children will chime in like, oh, I asked my kid and they said no, or I asked my kid and they said yes, or my kid read this and they thought it was scary, or they said that this is not relevant. So I get like some
that's
feedback in
good.
that way,
Okay.
but like the bulk of the feedback from kids, which can be the harshest critics, which is probably for the best, that comes, like, after the book has been published.
Doesn't break you from the, having the confidence of going, yeah, that's my life. I get my confidence destroyed every day from my lovely fifth graders. So.
Now don't even just some of the things that you say that you're like, "They love it."
Listen,
You push back gently.
it is a very like, they love to make fun of people and to get made fun of. So they're like, I love my fifth graders. This is just the best grade. So
You're perfect for it.
yes, absolutely. So the other thing I want to talk about both books, but I think especially it came from the trees, the a lot of the things that to me, outside of obviously this potential creature that's wreaking havoc, this fear and this sort of feeling of hopelessness that your main character has from not being believed about what she saw. And I think that this is something that a lot of kids kind of have as a primal fear, that when something happens or their voice doesn't matter. And I think that you really approach that really well, outside of like horror, with a capital H. This is something that I think all kids can relate to and experience, which kind of helps them connect to the story in general. Was that something going into it that you were like, yeah, I know that I want this to be a theme here?
Probably subconsciously. I guess for me, at the start of the story, Jenna is, like, highly conscious of the fact that she's not in a safe space,
Yeah.
both physically and emotionally.
Mhm.
For me, that, like, comes from experience. When I was a kid, I had a lot of anxiety, but specifically social anxiety. So whenever I was in, like, there I dreaded nothing more than, like, going into a room where I didn't know anyone. So I was always looking for, like, an exit, and if I couldn't find an exit fast enough, then I was looking for, like, a safe person. So I think that's true for, like, all non-white people when you're in certain
Mhm.
spaces where you are looking for safety of some sort, even if it happens subconsciously. So again, at the beginning, Jenna's, like, highly conscious of this. There are no adults looking out for her, and that is really scary when you're a kid because that's what you're taught. Oh, look for the adults. They're supposed to help you. They're supposed to guide you. They're supposed to take care of you. And so when you don't have that, it's really isolating. And that doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily go away when you're an adult. As an
Mhm.
adult for me, when I worked in corporate America, it came in the form of people, not trusting your knowledge or your experience and questioning your judgment, even if you're,
Mhm.
like, really skilled or knowledgeable in a particular area. So, yeah, I think that, like, that is something that, like, I wanted to kind of tease out in this book.
You did a wonderful job of it. It really comes through. It does. It's very much like, and I was so impressed, like, with her character, that she's willing to just go for the love of her friend to have join a second group and go through all this again. And she's just a really brave character.
Thank you.
I think that, that first section, I'm thinking specifically the scene where the counselor is asking them to go get wood once again. And the way that that escalates in such a real way that, like, I've seen as a teacher watching other adults and noticing sort of the different treatment for kids based on how they look, based on, their race, based on, you know, sort of all these other factors, and wondering, you know, and then having difficult conversations of like, do you realize that you're doing this? And I think it is so realistic because on the outside looking in, I think that counselor could be like, "What's the big deal? I'm just asking them to get wood. We need wood. Why wouldn't they want to do that to help the campers?" But, looking at it from their point of view and looking at it sort of outside, it's like this feels so unfair, but also like something that has probably happened millions of times. Was that based on any kind of experience, or were you just like, this is definitely something that would happen?
If it's based on experience, it might be something that I don't remember at this point, something I've carried with me. It's possible. I went to an all white high. It was a drastic difference for me. I went to an all black school for grades K through 8. And then when I went to high school, my high school was predominantly like 90% white. And that was a real shift for me. So it is possible that has happened. Maybe I've blocked it out. I don't know. But for me, it was really just general knowledge. Like, this is something that would happen because, as you said, Adam, like, I think sometimes adults treat kids differently based on how they look, and they may not realize it. I find it hard to believe that they don't realize that they're doing
Yeah.
it, but it happens. And so I could
Just in
totally
the
see
words that it said,
him.
where it's like one character or one child can have like a strong character, well, another one has attitude and they act exactly the same way, but there's only one difference, and you can probably guess what that difference is,
Mhm.
right?
Well, I
Yep.
felt like even at the there's a point where they discuss this with the counselor, and the counselor basically alleges that she kind of weaponizes it and says like,
That
well,
Reese had gotten violent,
she
like,
got violent with me.
argumentative and,
And it's like, "Well, that's not how I read it." It just seemed like she was like, "Why is it us again?" And I think that is such a good point to just from the beginning of the book towards the end of tying those together. And just, I mean, that's part of the reason why we read, right? Is to have social empathy, coming from someone who is, fully white, but you're trying to learn other perspectives and see other things. It's like, that's how you gain empathy.
Mhm. Exactly.
and hopefully, readers, and I want to talk about this a little bit more, sort of representation, in both of these stories. But I think that the grandfather character in It Came from the Trees was really interesting to me because he was sort of the one that believed Jenna, and some of that was because of his personal experience. Sort of where did the idea of that grandfather character come from? Because he was also the first black ranger at this park. Is he based on anyone in reality, or was this just sort of like I wanted a character that was on genocide?
Well, I think I wanted to include an adult character who believes Jenna because I think it's important for kids to know that they can still depend on adults. In a lot of middle grade fiction, obviously the kids are the focus. And I've seen reviews of all middle grade books where the reader and usually an adult reader will say, well, the adults were so like they didn't contribute or help. And it's like, well, that's the point. It's middle grade fiction. The kids are supposed to
Right.
like solve the problem.
The
But I
primary,
think
yeah.
I still wanted to show in the background that there are gonna be, adults who can help, and Jenna, I was just talking about, like, when you have, like, a lot of social anxiety in general, like, you're looking for safety in certain places, and so for Jenna, she has that safety for the most part, like, it comes in the form of her mom most of the time, definitely her grandfather, so when she's in a situation where it's, like, not safe for her, like, she recognizes that. I grew up on, Pittsburgh. I grew up on Mister Rogers, and you're supposed to look for the helpers. You're supposed to
Right.
look around
Yes.
to like find the people who are helping. And when Jenna can't find that, like that's a real problem for her. So I wanted to like have her Pat be there in the background as like, no, there is like a safe person that like she can like go and talk to who will believe her. As far as him as Pat being like the first black park ranger in Sturbridge, that is just there are a lot of reports from Black people who are made to feel unsafe, when they step foot in the outdoors. They're
Mhm.
told you don't belong, or they're treated, suspiciously just for like being outside.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah.
What
And
are you actually doing here? Like, what
Yeah.
is your yeah.
we saw a ton of this during the pandemic. People had like
Oh,
more time to be outdoors, and it was, well, what are you doing walking your dog over there? Or what are you doing bird watching? So, in addition to like this whole book, the character of Pat was specifically meant to be like, no, the outdoors are for everyone, not just a select
Mhm.
group.
yes.
And they've been there for a long time.
I
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
feel like as we talk about this, I'm getting angry in my chest. Like, this could turn into a whole other, like, because we're both very passionate about
Yeah.
that. And it's just the stereotypes and
Mhm.
what we allocate to certain things. It sucks. And that's why horror lives outside of just the horror genre in general.
Yeah, and, I was talking about, experience or knowledge, and it's not always valued because of how you look, and you look at a character like Jenna who knows pretty much everything that there is to know about the outdoors, and she is still questioned by people who know
Mhm.
less than her.
Uh-huh.
Her information is still, like, scrutinized, and unfairly just because of how she looks and because of her
Yeah.
age.
And there's always, I grew up in Washington, DC at my high school was kind of the opposite of yours, where,
Mhm.
I was the minority there. And so
Yep.
I feel very fortunate that pretty much all of my teachers were black, and they would talk about a lot of things, with students, being real with them, in that sort of idea of the standard that you have to be twice as good, a lot of times. And I think like Jenna represents that, and the idea that she is twice as good and it's still not enough for these people.
Yeah.
And I think I want to seg you into Mystery James here a little bit because, two, Mystery James is really close to my heart because I grew up directly next to a giant cemetery as well. So as soon as like those things came in, I was like, oh God, yes, this is
I was like, "This is Adam."
I love
Yeah.
this so
Can
much.
I pause you for a second, Adam? Because when you said, "Oh, I grew up next to a cemetery," I've had a couple people say that to me, and I always, like, clench my jaw, and I'm like, "Oh, no, what did I get wrong?"
Nothing.
Well, I didn't live in the cemetery like Mystery, but like when I looked out my bedroom window, there was like multiple graves and statues.
Oh, that's cool.
I was very close to the actual caretaker, so I spent a lot of time in the cemetery,
Oh,
and to me, it felt like I was at home, so I think you nailed it.
well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yes, the joke always is, "Oh, you have quiet neighbors," you know? It's like, it wasn't always that quiet, unfortunately, but the other thing that, when I did my review, as I was reading this book, all I could think about was all those, like, really just beautiful, wonderful videos of all of these little black girls watching the first preview for The Little Mermaid live action and
Mhm,
saying, "Ariel looks like me." And
mhm.
I look at all these Goosebump books, and none of those characters look like Mystery James. And now all of these kids are gonna have someone that can say, I wanna be Mystery James. It's
Love
like
it.
I can dress up like Mystery James for Halloween, like all that kind of stuff.
Or
And
dress
it
as a
just
book character.
yeah, and it just makes me so happy. And the fact that like this book is just so good on top of it. I just love that you've done that. And it's unapologetically, this isn't like diversity for diversity's sake. This is who Mystery James is. And the way that you sort of go through this entire town and talk about all of the different things. Obviously, her adopted aunt, is Latina. And like all of these things are done in a way that it's just like, that's just who they are. This isn't for any other reason than because that's who that person is. And I think that that is a wonderful representation for people that are reading this, but also, like Rebecca said, that sort of empathy and saying, like, this character that maybe I don't see at my school, someone that looks like them, I have a lot more in common with them than I think I do. And to get someone at 10, 11, 12 thinking that is something that can really change things.
It's
So
pretty
I just
critical.
really appreciate, that this book exists.
I thank you for saying that, for noticing that. This is just told you that, like, I went to school grades K through 8. Like, my neighborhoods were all black and brown. My school was all black and brown. So, like, being in, like, a setting with, like, just white people, like, that was very new to me when I turned 14. But, like, for the first, 13 years of my life, I was surrounded by, like, nothing but other black and brown people. And so it's just normal to me to have a world or a town like Ellistown where, most people are, like, people of color, and it's not it's just normal. I don't know what else to say. It's just normalized.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. There are towns like that. There are cities like that.
Yeah, and I love that because it's like, of course, the funeral home is run by someone of color. Of course, all of these different things. Whereas, I think some people just seeing that those things exist and talking about it really is a step forward. And unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but something that people haven't been exposed to. For me, like where I teach has some, not very much diversity. So, as a teacher trying to point kids, mostly white kids, to books that are going to expand that is really great to have like in my repertoire. But then also, for the kids that are, black, brown, whatever, to say like, here's a book that's not all of these books that you see in the library that you look on the cover and you see yourself, So I just
Mhm.
I really love that. But then like on top of it, this book is spooky as hell, you
It
know.
pushes some boundaries. I was like, I'm
So
almost not scared, but like, dang.
yeah, I think the two main like questions initially that I have is, did you research somewhere and find somewhere that people smell ghosts? Or was that completely your creation? And just how did that come about?
Okay, so I have this weird thing where I think I can smell electricity, and I know it's not a thing, but I don't know how else to describe it. Um,
I feel like I know what you're talking about.
it's tangy and it's like a tart smell, but it's usually comes from when something is, like, plugged in, and it's specifically, like, any kind of, like, lamp or anything that uses, like, a USB charger or, like, a cord built has, like, a USB cord built into it. Like, on our nightstands, we have these, My husband and I have these little lamps, and when you tap them, they go up different shades of brightness, but you can also plug stuff into them to charge. And he will plug his phone in to charge it, and I can smell when the phone is charging. And I don't know how else to explain that. It's probably not good. Something's probably burning. I can smell it. And he never smells. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, but I can smell it. And I'll walk into the room like, you need to unplug your phone now. Because it's done, like it's charged. I can smell it, it's done.
That's so
So
cool.
it's a weird thing, and I feel like it's like petrichor, like, right? The smell of rain. Like, some people can smell it, some people don't notice it. And I know I'm not smelling electricity. I'm probably just smelling something burning, and my nose is just more sensitive to it. But one day I had this like really horrifying thought where I was like, my husband's like, I don't smell anything. And I'm like, well, what if it's a ghost? And then
Oh,
my imagination just like took over from there.
that is brilliant. I love it. And so, okay, weird fact about me.
I keep saying, like, I'm like, you better tell her this now that
So
she says
when
this.
it comes to smells, I have always been able to smell when people have a very specific type of, I don't know how else
Mental
to say it.
illness.
I would say mental illness. And I'm always right. And it freaks me out. And so we've done a lot of research on it, and it's a real thing that
So
Wow.
people,
apparently schizophrenics genuinely do give off a particular scent and that you can smell it. Now, I don't know, Adam, that you're specifically smelling schizophrenics, because there are people that you've been around that we know have certain diagnoses, and you're like, nope, I don't smell it with them.
no.
So but it's enough that it's nauseating to you.
Yeah, it really affects me. And,
And how would you describe it? You said it's like,
it's actually very similar to almost what you're describing when you say you can smell the electricity. It's very specific. It's very obviously coming from the person. And so, as a teacher, sometimes it'll be parent teacher conference day and stuff like that, and someone will walk in and I'll be like, uh-oh, better be careful here. So,
Have
you
you
know
done any research into this, Adam?
yeah, it's a real thing that people can
Yeah.
smell certain, I don't know if it's like a
Certain
frequency that
elements.
comes off of them or something,
well,
but, like you said, like,
sometimes they said, like, there was a section where people were saying, like, they can smell when their husband's getting sick. Like, they can smell like their sweat has a different change,
yeah,
like their breath,
And animals,
just,
right?
yes, like
right.
it's very,
I'm part dog, apparently.
apparently, well, pick something like wolf or I don't know, something.
Report that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's so, interesting. It made it very believable to me, because I love that you both have a heightened sense for this. And it's just something like, you're right. Like, what if you could smell a ghost? Like, dang.
And it makes it scary too, because it's almost like, I don't know, I think of like, I don't know why it made me think of this, but the scene in Aliens when
Mm.
they're seeing the aliens on the radar, but they can't see them like in person. It's that same kind of thing. Like, there's a ghost here, and later on it kind of changes a little bit, but there's a ghost here, but I don't know where it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know who it is, but it's here.
I am going to choose to believe that I'm just smelling burning wires, because the alternative is too terrifying.
Yeah. Just
Mm.
think a ghost is plugging in your husband's phone. He's just helping out,
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's just such a cool aspect of Mystery's character. And then, I would not think it's spoiling because it's on the back of the book, but the one of, or if not the main villain of this book, is something very different. Like, it's very familiar, but so original and different at the same time that it's really like scary when you first introduce. And it's described as a half ghost, half vampire. Like, where did that come from?
Okay, well, his name is Baron, for those who haven't read it yet, and that he's the creepy dude on the front of the book. And Baron was inspired by indecisiveness. I'm probably the worst kind of writer, because I'm so like I was just talking to one of my writing friends about this, and how when you know about like a certain subject, you want to like just throw everything that you know about that subject into a book, and you can't. Like, that's what editors are for. And I was really struggling with whether or not I wanted this to be a ghost book or a vampire book, and then or something else entirely. And so I was kind of like, maybe something else entirely. But it ended up being half vampire, half ghost, because this book is inspired by the vampire of Highgate Cemetery. Have you guys heard of the
Yeah.
vampire? So for those who don't know, like, it happened in London in the 70s, and
Mhm.
people reported seeing like this big, tall supernatural figure like stalking them from inside the cemetery gates. And it was highly, highly sensationalized. Like psychics were fighting with each other. Like it was a wild time. But anyway, this is what inspired Bear and the Vampire. I was like, well, I really want like I like that story, that legend of the vampire of Highgate Cemetery. It would just make sense if he was kind of like this like creature that was between two worlds because that's what the undead are anyway, right? So
Right.
it would
Yeah.
be cool if he was like a little more spiritual too, like instead of like a corporeal presence. So that's where it came from.
Just he's just sinister. I mean, and rotten in the best possible way, in terms of
But at the same time,
embodies
yeah.
like you're
And I
not
put that as a blurb on the next book. He's sinister and rotten in the best way.
absolutely. I mean, I really feel like but like at the same time, like
He's so smart
but like
too.
I liked him. Like I really liked him. Like, I guess you're not supposed to like a villain, but I did like him. Like
I think
he just seemed
because
like he was like ruthless and unabashed about it.
but also at the same time, he has a clear motive that you can understand, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that like sometimes in, especially in horror, it's like it's evil because it's evil. And like, Baron is not good, but his motives, while selfish and whatnot, are certainly like, if I was in that position, would I not be doing the same thing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And sort of presenting this Faustian, deal bargain to mystery, like it sort of brings in, at an age where you're sort of figuring out what's right, what's wrong, what, who you are, to face her with sort of these dilemmas, I think is like so interesting. And so as a middle grade reader, I can imagine it's sort of like, yeah, like what would I do? Not to get into specifics of what that might be, but she is presented with the choice of something that seems really right and something that seems really wrong, but at the same time, it's not black and white either. So
Mhm.
like I just thought that was really interesting in a middle grade book to have something that worked that way because I don't think you see it a lot.
I think about this a lot, like stuff like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. How could Edmund betray his sibling? Stuff
Yeah.
like and
Easy.
everybody likes to think that they would do the right thing in
Mhm.
a situation, but the reality is that no one knows how they would like you could say, "Oh, sure, I would like, save my." I think Will Ferrell has like a comedy. I haven't seen it with Julia, I think it's Julia Louis Dreyfus in it, and he
Yeah.
one of they have like a near death experience or something like that.
Like
I think
skiing or
that
something like that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and, like, he doesn't do the thing that, like, a husband and father is supposed to do, like, which is to, like, go save his family, and so, like, it causes all these problems between them, and I think that is something that I just think about a lot because I myself, like, when I get scared, I'm a freezer, and I hate to admit that. When I'm genuinely terrified, like, I will freeze up, and you watch horror movies, and what
Mm.
do you say? "Why are you just standing there? Why aren't you
Yeah.
ready?"
Mhm.
Because you don't actually know how you would respond in some
That's
situation.
me.
Yeah.
That's what's
Or
gonna
even when you run, it's like, they're like,
Mhm.
why are they tripping? I'm like, because your body doesn't work when
You
you're
don't
scared.
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your and yeah, so,
Yeah.
like, I think about that a lot when I think about, villains and their motives and how people respond to, like, terrifying situations, and so it
I
just
think
felt natural to include that in the story.
Yeah.
that's the fun part though with horror, I think, is that you can actually it lets you sit with that uncomfortability. You can try on a lens of what happens when, you may or may not do
Mhm,
the right thing. And speaking of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like definitely one of my favorite like books as a
mhm.
kid, but I was always like, how good is this Turkish delight that he would do like and I've kind of been obsessed with and then like recently it was at like I don't know, it was like a vendor place, and then someone was selling Turkish towels, and they had Turkish delight that you could try. And I just happened to have like a cold that I could not taste anything, and I was like, really?
Oh,
And
no!
I wanted to see like what was this thing that was willing to betray that he's like, I need this.
Well, he was English though. They have weird.
That was the example I went for, but I think about
But
it
it's
often
but it's
because
so true though. But like, I think that's, and I know that there's like a whole thing about like, the blood flushes to like certain extremities or it helps you, whatever. But I'm totally like a freezer myself. So, I
Mhm,
mean, just, you don't know. And I think that's really fun to explore that. I did want to share that one of the parts in the book that I was like, shit, like I genuinely scared me is like when the grandmother has died and mysteries talk like, and all of a sudden like her ghost, like she sits up.
Mhm.
And I was like, God, I was like, that really, really got me. And I love too how like eventually like the granddaughter's like, yeah, she told me you were coming. And I was like, ah.
Yeah.
So I just want to tease it a little bit to some of our listeners because they're probably like, oh, this is a great episode. And we're talking about social things and, and race and whatnot. But like really read the book. I
Yeah.
mean, it has everything that you'd want. Please, please, please. Like, cause if honestly, I mean, I wouldn't be wandering into that aisle. I wouldn't be, I'm not teaching fifth grade or any of these things, but I'm so glad I didn't miss out on this because it's excellent. And it really does give you the scares. And I love how, you just said the Faustian where it's like bargain. If you don't know what that is, like, Allie makes sure that she tells you what that is. And there's just it's just one of these things that you're going to love it. It almost feels like, certainly does not have the feel of Hocus Pocus, but it's like one of those things where you're like, I'm so glad I read this. Like
Yeah.
it's a comfort book
Yeah. I'm going to read this
of
every Halloween. It
yes,
gives you that feeling of
yes.
Oh,
like, I will
you're
revisit
gonna
this
make me
story.
cry.
It was really good. She really is. I mean, if you've grown up on like Nancy Drew or, anybody that just, went after some of the, like,
She's a very inspiring character no
she
matter
is like,
what
she's just
age you
not
are.
afraid of
Yeah.
anything. And, I mean, she might be, but she does what she needs to do.
Yeah, like true bravery where,
Yes.
and I think going back to that bargain, I think that like we don't know how we're going to react. We also we don't always know what the right answer is. Like it's not always that obvious, like of like this is good and this is bad. Obviously in this book, there are aspects of it that are very bad that she would have to do that I won't get into. But it's not always that simple because when it does become, and I don't know exactly what happens in that movie with Will Ferrell, but sometimes I think that your evolutionary like response is to save yourself first, always. And I think that like we assume that we are going to want to save the people that we love first. And I don't know if your body, you might say, and that might be what
You
you really
wonder if
want to
if
do,
it gets
but
overridden by that
yeah,
chameleon brain
yeah,
of
Mhm.
no, save yourself first. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and okay, not to talk about the person that we don't talk about when we talk about magical fiction, but, like, you think about, like, Gryffindors, right?
yeah.
Everybody when I was growing up, everybody wanted to be a Gryffindor, and
Hmm.
I never had that, like, sense because I knew that
Mhm.
I was like, I don't know what I would do in these situations, and I think that there's a lot of fiction where it's presented like, this is the way to correctly respond in a terrifying situation, and
Hmm.
that to me always feels forced because
Yeah.
you don't know.
And I think it's interesting because I know the new Superman movie is out. And like as a kid, I loved comic books and I did not like Superman because he was boring to me because it was always so obvious and he could do it. Like he was the most powerful thing no matter what he was facing, he was more powerful than it. And that's why Batman was always more interesting. Now he's more complicated to me now with the whole billionaire and all that kind of stuff going on. But the fact that he did not have powers and he was choosing to do these things anyway, like that to me was far more interesting. And I think that that's sort of what mystery is here too, where it's like she is a child, she, has a very small group of people she can depend on. And she has to really struggle with what she is going to do and how, even if she wants to do the right thing, does she even have the power to be able to make any kind of change? And
Mhm.
like, I
And
think that that's very, like, that's far more interesting than I make the right decision all the time.
and the impacts to her aunt and to their lifestyle and there's a lot at stake for her.
Can I quickly defend Superman, the new Super the
Yes.
new the
And
new
yes, I
the
know.
new
Okay, let's hear it.
She's like,
Superman
now you done pissed me off, Adam.
No, no, I agree with you, to some degree, like, I like a complicated villain and or superhero, one where I feel like I'm cursed with seeing, like, both sides of the situation all the time,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate that, like, when I can read about, like, gray characters. The new Superman is quite perfect, I will say,
I've
like,
heard that. I am interested, very interested to see it. And it's like, especially the people that don't like it make me want to see it so much more.
well, I grew up as a Superman fan because I used to watch Lois and Clark with my dad and my sister. That was my
Same.
introduction to Superman, and I just grew up, liking like that. I didn't have like a real love of all superheroes, but this new Superman movie, if you need like a spark of hope, it is so good, and it's really just about like Superman doesn't always know what the right thing is. He just knows that, like, he needs to be kind and protect other people, and I think that that is a very important message that
Yeah.
some people missed out on apparently while they were growing up and,
Yeah.
like, not watching Mister Rogers. So, I
Yeah.
that's my plug for Superman.
And like as a kid, that was or teen, all moody teen and stuff like that. As I'm reading comics, that was my view on Superman. I think
Mhm,
as I get older, I look at it and I think he is this powerful, and he is, does have all these things, and he's not even from here,
mhm,
but he's doing all, and he chooses to do whatever he can to help at all times. So,
right,
like, on that flip side, I'm like, there is a lot more to him than sort of, one issue of the comic will show you, like when you look at
right.
kind of the overall thing. So yeah, I do appreciate that the new movie goes, to those areas. So, no hate to Superman at all, but sort of he's always been
No,
sort of
I
that
get where you're
light, whereas Batman was the dark kind of thing. So that's really interesting. So as we're ending here, as we get to the hour, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but we really like to ask the authors, who right now do you notice is picking up an Ally Russell book, and how would you want to expand that? So especially as a middle grade author, and I think about this with YA, middle grade, like anything outside of, whatever we consider traditional adult, literature. I think that what we think of as those things has changed so much that, a young adult book, adult is in the title. In middle grade, it almost more than anything tells you who the story is about more than who it's for. Do you like agree with that? And who would you want to read your books?
never okay, there are some people who have an aversion to children's books, and it really makes me angry. I feel like middle grade is often treated like the middle child of fiction. It's like you've got for young readers, like you've got picture
Mhm.
books and they're super cute and they're for little kids and that's like the baby, of the family. And then you've got YA, which is edgier, it's cooler, apparently. It's, for teens and like, it's the definitely like the cool older sibling. And then you have middle grade, just like tucked in the middle. And people like turn their noses up at it. They don't see the importance of it. But I think it's really important for people to understand that, like, you don't wake up one day and become a YA reader. You don't wake up one day and become an adult, a reader of adult fiction. Your, like, love of books oftentimes, like, develops in this very, like, sorry, that's not the word I want. Pivotal stage, ages like 8 to 12, and so if we're not, like, taking care of middle grade, we're going to lose a lot of adult readers. Like, there are gonna be people who, like, go from picture books to nothing. There are too many people who have not read a book since high school. So I would say that, like, the books that I'm writing, while they're categorized as, like, middle grade, for me, they're for ages, like, 10 to, like, 100, like, how or older.
That's awesome.
So I am oh, sorry,
You're creating a bridge. Like, I love how well you said that because it's true, right? And I go back to just, so many people are like, just, I don't read that much. I've never read that much. I don't know how to get into a book. And it's like, if this is you right now, it's like, I promise you, both of the books that Allie has talked about today, it's like, you will be engrossed. You'll be glad you read it. You'll be highly entertained and you will not feel like you're in, you know, middle school or that you are, 10 years old. It is for the 10 plus, but it's going to facilitate your joy of like, I just want to enjoy reading a book again.
mhm. And I would honestly say, to people who have that feeling that you just expressed, Rebecca, of, oh, I don't know how to get into a book. Any way that you can. As an adult, reading is so hard for me now. Like I think about the fact that when I was a kid, I used to just like lay across my bed and I would like power through, a 200, 300-page book because I had nothing else to do, no real worries. I was taken care of, I was fed, and like that book was like what was happening in the lives of those characters, like those were my worries. And there's so much going on in the world around us today that like it's really hard for me to sit and read a book these days. So I get through them
Hmm.
any way that I can. And usually like when I'm reading, I have to have a book in at least two formats. I need like either
Yes.
digital and an audio book or audiobook and print
Hmm.
book. Like I can't just like have just the one format. And I was talking to my nephew about this because he is trying to like get more into reading. And he's like, well, I don't know about audio. I'm like, just do whatever you need to do to get excited about it. And then
Hmm.
you'll be
Hmm.
surprised at like how much like your enthusiasm for a story will take over from there. Like, oh man,
Yeah.
my audio ran out. Let me go get the paperback so I can finish.
Hmm. So completely agree with that. And I think my count already this year is like, I'm at like 130 books or so.
Oh,
And yeah, but I play this game with myself every single time I start a book. Swear to you that I'm like, okay, you just got to get to page 25. And then after that, you just got to get to page 50.
uh,
And it's like you would think it would get easier, but it isn't because my brain is still like on that. It's highly distractible.
yep.
It's like starting something. I don't know why, but I have like dread to start it, even though like I deeply want to read it.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually like the hook kicks in enough. And then I'm like, yes, like I almost picture it as like a huge analogy person, which I realize I'm not an analogy person. I think in pictures, which is something I learned thanks to the internet that like there are people that think in pictures and that's me. But it's like when you're walking through the waves and you're getting them crashed on you, it's really difficult. But after you get out to a certain point, you're just kind of bobbing and floating and it's easy. You're not really like having to work, in the same way that when the waves are crashing on you.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I feel about starting a book is it's like, I know that I'm going to absolutely love it and I'm going to be so glad I did it. But that first couple of pages of walking through the waves and kind of getting bowled over a little bit, like it is hard for me every single time.
Yeah.
So I agree with like, and sometimes like if I need to do an audiobook because I'm like, you know what, I'm just not feeling so good or I have a lot of things to get done,
Uh-huh.
and plus I feel like I've said this to Adam, like I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can't do audiobook, I can't pay attention or it doesn't do anything for me. For me, I love being read to. Like that
Right.
just feels wonderful to me. Like that's cozy. But I also love the e-reader and I love, the physical book. Like to me, I'm a fan of all of it, but I do think there's a medium for different times. And I am someone that suffers with like migraines and whatnot. And so sometimes an audiobook is just the right fit for me too.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I agree completely.
So it sounds like 10 to 1,000 would be your age group for books that you write, and I totally agree with that.
I mean, if you're Baron and you're 1,000 or a vampire and you're sure, but, yeah, no, everybody can read it
Yeah,
really, and like I said, even 10, everybody's tolerance for horror is different.
yeah,
That's so true.
yeah, definitely. So obviously, Mystery is coming out September. What's the exact date?
16th?
September
Nice.
16th. Good birthday present. Rebecca's the 14th.
Oh, happy early birthday!
Yep. And then you have another book coming out by the end of the year. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. That one is called Down Came the Spiders from Scholastic, and it takes place on Halloween night, and it's about a girl who goes to a Halloween party. She's dealing with a lot of social anxiety, but she's got her friends there, and spiders descend on the party.
Baby, I'm locked in.
Yeah. I'm terrified but locked in. Yeah.
Now, and that one, most of the fiction that I've written, I'm trying to cater to slightly older readers, ages 10 plus, but that one I would say is squarely middle grade. So if you're looking for something closer to Goosebumps, that's probably it.
Okay.
Cute.
And I'll be looking for it at all the fairs at school this in
Mhm.
my
You're
flyers.
like, I know her. I
I'll uh
know
I'll
her.
circle it when I send it home to the parents.
Yeah.
This one's especially good. You're gonna want this one.
Yeah.
Thank you
Where
guys.
can we find you on the socials and whatnot?
I'm mostly on Instagram these days. I'm at One Dark Alley, spelled Allly. That's mostly where you can find me. I also have like a newsletter slash blog that I run, and I do check comments on that. Yeah, mostly those two places.
It is an excellent newsletter blog, and I love that you add something scary for people to check out, whether it's a
That's
video or whatever.
always my most on link. I'm like, oh, I wonder how I like. No, no other link, just that one at the end.
Yeah,
Well, if I did nothing else, I scared somebody today, so that's good.
yeah. That's a really good
N-
accomplishment. I love that.
Scaring is love, apparently.
Yeah,
That's your love
exactly.
language.
In my world, it is.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
we can look forward to, I know you're doing revisions now. Is there a date set or is it just TBA for book 2 of this
It's
duology?
TBA 2026. That's all I have.
Okay.
So
All
wish me
right.
luck
Well,
with my revisions, and we stay on
I will
schedule.
I wish you luck, and I will be sitting here just waiting for that book to be able to be read.
Thanks for being a fabulous guest. I love all the things that we went through. I feel like this is the goal of our podcast is to really get into some of the deeper social concepts. And I feel like we've explored a lot of those things. And ideally, we've broadened your audience to who's willing to read it, not just, certain kids, that the adults will as well. And we hope that you'll come back on once you have another, when Mysteries Part 2 is going to come out, or even just, after the spiders, because um, a lot of people have the arachnophobia. I am not one of them. I like spiders, but I feel like there's so much to learn from your book. So, Allie, thanks for coming on, and hopefully you'll be back.
And I just wanted to thank you both so much for the support. It's really meant a lot to me. Even my husband was like, he saw Adam's post and was like, "This Adam guy really likes your book." And I was like, so I was like, yeah. So I just appreciate both of you. Rebecca, your kind words, and I wanted to thank you both for being such advocates for Mystery James.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's a love fest, so we'll make sure to scare you because we'll see you at
Yes.
Spooktastic. So,
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Looking forward
Yeah,
to it.
we'll be there.
yep. All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.